So I am delighted now to introduce the next folks that I was just talking about. We have a panel of thank you very much, three amazing organizations that can help you understand a bit more about their influence on our progress over the last 10 years, where they are planning to head into the future, and how they can guide us in using our voices. I am thrilled to introduce Jessica Roach from Restoring Our Own Through Transformation. Kate McGarvey from Legal Aid of Central and Southwestern Ohio. And Dominique Johnson from Groundwork, Ohio. These are very formal, like we're just sitting very squarely. I was hoping for more of a I'm going to turn my chair like this so I can see you.
Perfect.
All right. Actually, let me grab my questions real quick. So first, I want to say thank you for agreeing to participate in this panel. That's never easy, making time for other organizations when you have your own work going on, but I'm grateful for it. And I know for sure, thank you. And I know for sure that our audience will benefit greatly from it. So before we jump into the meat and potatoes, actually this is the meat and potatoes, because telling us who you are, how you got here, telling us about your organization and what this work means to you, will set the stage for the rest of our panel today. Dominique, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you for having me here today. In many ways, this work really found me. I lost my daughter to stillbirth in 2020, and then I had a preterm birth with my son. He was born at 29 weeks, 2 pounds, 6 ounces in 2022. So there's a lot of trauma, as you guys could know, that comes with that. And I was at a CelebrateOne event, I think the same event you're talking about. And I found out about Queens Village Columbus, and they are Black-led organizations that advocate for maternal and infant health. And they don't just advocate, but they really uplift Black women in the community and show you how to use your voice and the importance of putting yourself first to be a great mother. And through that, I was able to get on the Ohio Better Birthing Committee, and then work with Nationwide Children's on some slave sleep initiatives, and be a part of a Marsha Dimes event, and work on Ohio Infant Vitality Advocacy Day, where I learned about Groundwork Ohio, where I work now, and as a policy associate for the maternal and child health. And it's a statewide nonpartisan organization that advocates for early childhood and health development for the most vulnerable in our state. So I got to not just focus on the infant mortality in Columbus, but look at a wider view and to try to make real policy changes. So with my work with Groundwork Ohio and Queens Village, it's actually helped me to kind of heal and give my pain a purpose.
I just want to highlight that she mentioned that her gateway was the first birthday party, and it just sucked her in, and you just kept going and going and going. And now we get to work with you every day, all day.
Yeah, it's a real circle.
Yes, it is.
It's full circle moment.
It is. Kate.
Well, thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm Kate McGarvey. I'm the Executive Director of Legal Aid of Southeast and Central Ohio. We are a nonprofit law firm that provides legal representation to low-income families, individuals, and children. And so we, for a number of years, have had medical legal partnerships with CelebrateOne, with OBO, and with Nationwide Children's Hospital. And what those do is really allow us to connect with pregnant women, with babies, and address the health-harming legal needs that they might have. And so those are the most common issues we see fall in sort of 3 areas. Those include housing, so whether it's housing instability, housing conditions issues, fair housing issues. And then the next area involves income stability. And so that's often public benefits. And so it could be access to Medicaid, it could be access to certain services, could be unemployment compensation. And then the third area is in our family law area. So women who may be victims of domestic violence, who may need protection orders or custody. And so those intervening in those situations have really been shown to help pregnant women and babies reduce stress, to have less emergency room visits, to have better income, all of which helps with infant mortality.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So, my name is Jessica Roach, and I am the CEO and founder of Restoring Our Own Through Transformation, also known as Root. I am I'm a Black woman. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother now. Third one coming. Got to get a minivan again. I am a nurse. I'm a master's of public health, and I am a midwife. I come to this work with all of those things as an extension of my life experience as a teen mother and then a mother of a preterm infant after I became a nurse and was working at The Ohio State University as a research nurse. And then the mother of my third child that I had that was a completely healthy pregnancy and was able to change what the narrative was. The whole purpose of starting Root really comes from that. The word there is key. It's foundational. It's how is it that we can take a look at our history and our culture and the things that we have done for ourselves in order to protect and save our communities and to protect our babies and to build out that Black family structure and be able to apply that to the community. So Root is an organization that comes out of all of our experiences collectively. We do that through multiple ways. We address through our perinatal support specialists, also known as doulas to many in the room. That's through our direct service model. We do health research, we do public policy and advocacy. And all of those things operate in a way that allowed us to be an organization for almost 8 years now in July. And we have been able to maintain a 0% Black maternal mortality rate throughout that entire period. And we unfortunately do have the statistic that we have lost just one infant during that 8-year period, and it was not during the neonatal phase. It was in the 4th month due to medical complications and issues. And so for us, it's very important that we know that we take a look at the landscape, the resources that we have, the intuitive knowledge that all of our families have, and be able to apply those in a practical way with the medical sector, the healthcare systems, and other community organizations that support and align this our work.
Thank you. Kate, I'm coming to you next. You mentioned the primary places that you serve families. And when we were talking about this previously, you went into some of the specificities around housing specifically. We often think about evictions, but there's more to it than that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so our housing work has a range, and there has been a lot of community conversations around eviction, which is very important. And, at eviction court, there definitely is a huge need for families, and many of the families going through that process have children. But one of the areas we haven't talked as much about is housing conditions. And that's something that through my 20 plus years at Legal Aid, we have really seen an increased need for. As we've seen housing stock get older, as we've seen affordable housing become more and more of a crisis, it ends up with housing conditions getting worse and families really being stuck in conditions that harm their health. And so we see a lot of cases for families with pregnant women or with children where the housing conditions are really unsafe and that those housing conditions have health harming effects. For example, we had a family who had had a persistent leak in their ceiling. They had contacted the landlord had come out, but they'd really just done cosmetic fixes, hadn't actually fixed the structural problem that was causing the leak. So eventually that roof collapsed while the mother was pregnant. They contacted our office. We were able to help with the rent escrow process, which should be simpler than it is. But really, if you look at filings, it's very difficult to do that process without an attorney. So we were able to help get that family with their rent escrow, and then eventually help them relocate with damages for things to their belongings that had been injured, as well as the other issues that had happened when they were there. And that's not uncommon. We had another case of an infant who had been hospitalized over 20 times. And from the medical records, it appeared it was because of mold in the property. And so we were also able to help that family get both compensation and move to a place and keep their voucher. And so the whole range of issues, we've seen kids with serious bed bug bites all over their bodies as a result of conditions issues. And so I think it's something that we probably don't talk about enough in the community. Sometimes they're individual units that are a problem, but sometimes it's the whole complex. And we're able to help in both of those cases, and really working with CelebrateOne and others. We're able to work with the medical providers. They're able to identify families who may be in these situations and get them to us, and they might not otherwise think to contact us. And so that warm handoff, that training back and forth has really been able to help in those situations.
I had a red flag moment, a light bulb moment around the rent escrow process being so challenging that you must have a lawyer, and what kind of predicament that puts almost all families in. If they do not know that your services exist, do not have the funds to pursue a lawyer themselves, it doesn't really leave them that many options.
Right. And that's true. And we, at one point, went down and did sort of a survey of 50 random rent escrow cases. And I think there was one that was properly filed without an attorney. So it really is just more difficult than it should be. And that's, one option. There's litigation and other things that can be done, but that's the first option, and should be the most accessible to folks.
Yeah. All right, Dominique, I'm coming to you next. Okay. In your experience, can you talk about barriers that families face? And I'm talking through the myriad experience that you have. You've named so much. What kinds of barriers do you believe families face, and what can our community do better to mitigate them?
One of the reasons why I got involved in so many projects so fast is I saw that there's a major disconnect between the people in the community who are dealing with infant mortality and the programs and the care providers who are trying to help the problem. I was like 35 years old at the time. I had a stillbirth and a preterm birth, and I had no idea how big of a crisis the infant mortality was. I didn't know about programs like Root or Celebrate One. So we have to go into the communities. That's what I love about Queens Village is you build those connections, and you get to talk to the people and see what they need and be able to try to help them to connect with different things. But you have to have these voices in the room. Groundwork Ohio just recently released a Threads of Hope report where they partnered with CareSource and spoke to about 3,000 women about their birthing experiences. And we need to do more things like that. But we can't just talk to these women. Well, we have to take those voices back to the rooms that matter and try to make real system changes.
So I also want to plug, if you are interested in involvement with Queens Village, Dominique is a wonderful resource, so you can see her. Yes, afterwards? Wonderful. All right, so we're coming to you next, Jessica. All right, so Root, you mentioned them here, but Root does a lot of work. You have lines in the water in many different places. And one of those happens to be around family stabilization. And I'm wondering if you can talk us through what family stabilization looks like for Root and why that's important specifically for the Black family.
Absolutely. I think that one of the issues that I've seen over my 25-year career, and then being able to work and develop this out with Root, is that we have a tendency to look at this as if it's a single issue, and it's not. And we also have a tendency to take a look at our families as if we're monolithic, and we are not. And so you have to be able to address all of the factors and all of the drivers of our lives, right? And we find this across socioeconomic issues. So one of the things that we do, the framework of Root was created out of the principles of the impact of the structural determinants of health and how they have actually created the social determinants of health. And that's a framework that's also used with HRSA and now highlighted at the Centers for Disease Control in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia. We all know the CDC. We know, and what our organization does isn't just about the birth itself. Everybody wants to have a great birth outcome, right? But you can't get to a great birth outcome until you look at all of the factors within our families that we have to address. Simply being Black and walking through the world is a stress factor. Not having access to mental health providers is a stress factor. Not only not having access to affordable housing, but not having the ability to be able to establish intergenerational wealth through home ownership is an issue. And those are just a few, right? And so for us in our organization, we know that our families need to have that place of feeling like they can develop their own stabilization methods. How is it that we can help connect into workforce development? How can we provide that opportunity for workforce development? How can we make sure that those connections, when you do have the evictions, when you do have the put out notices, and you are guaranteed to be able to receive funds, but they haven't come through in time, how can we make sure that we're going to connect those dots? So we often provide those emergency gap services and being able to provide housing opportunities. We provide additional food resources. We provide diapers and wipes, all of those things. But we also are very clear about centering the voice of the family and taking a look at the entire unit. How is it that grandma's health might be impacting mom's stress level? How is dad actually managing himself and taking care of himself and also having his needs met? And acknowledging that there are hormonal changes that happen there as well. How is it that we are making sure that we are helping to educate the rest of the family, that it's not just about coming to hold the baby, it's about coming to wash clothes. It's about coming to make sure that you're preparing meals, because both mom and dad need to be able to rest and continue to bond with that baby. And so we acknowledge and know that while we cannot touch everything, we have to be able to look at all of these drivers that impact our families and create these negative outcomes. And so through part of that, not only with our perinatal support specialist core, we are also expanding and developing out our behavioral health division this year, which we're very excited about. So we will have crisis management as well as long-term therapy that we'll be able to provide for our families. We are also working on opening our clinic, which will be happening, grand opening will be April 17th. So we'll be able to have a provider that's working on our site with our perinatal support specialists, and then making sure that we also have these relationships with hospital systems. Shout out to Ohio Health, very specifically. Ohio Health Systems has been deeply engaged with our organization, and we have found that we have been able to meet and mitigate some of these issues and concerns that impact us, that lead to these negative outcomes. But instead of treating them as if it is a disease process, understanding that there are preventions that can be done ahead of time so that we don't have to talk about how it is that we're doing emergency management for a postpartum hemorrhage, because our postpartum hemorrhage rate is actually at 3%, which is considered statistically insignificant, because we're doing the work ahead of time to address all of these factors and understand that it's not just about being pregnant. It's about making sure that the family is stable and making sure that the environment is inviting to be able to come back home and create this environment where you're going to be able to know that you are well supported.
I did not give you a lot of time to answer that very in-depth question. It was done expertly.
You can send a brief.
Yes, that was amazing. So I have one more question for the three of you. The question is around a call to action for the folks in our audience today. What is it that you want them to take home with them today? What are the actions you would like them to take with them, or something you would like for them to know? Dominique, would you like to start?
Yes, I want for us to stop sitting back and letting things just happen to us. A lot of times we say we're going to vote every 4 years for president, but what about the policies that affect us every day here in Ohio? Right now, it's budget season, and they're making decisions for 2026 and 2027 whether these policies will affect whether this infant mortality rate continue to see improvements or drastically get worse. So I challenge everyone in here to go and find out who your legislators are, both in the Senate and in the House, and email them, call them, set up meetings, and talk to them about the policies that affect you and your family. If you guys need help, Groundwork Ohio has a lot of good information on their website. We have a family action network that helps parents and families learn how to advocate for themselves. We have a maternal and child health advocacy board where we partner with people that are working in the field, and we tell them the policies and they tell us what's going on, and we connect with them in that way. Also, come and listen to one of these committee hearings, or actually come and speak at one of these committee hearings and talk to these legislators and let them know about the policies that affect you. A lot of legislators that I talk to always say that they can't be the expert in everything, but you guys are the expert in your life, and there is no greater voice than somebody who has lived that experience. That's why I got into this work, and I really challenge you guys to just not just sit back and don't just vote, but actually make these people do what they say they're going to do.
And I think what I'd really like people to take away is just the connection between social determinants of health and legal outcomes. So I think that oftentimes people don't want to think about lawyers, or they don't want to think about the legal system, but it's really, really important, and it can have a huge impact. And so I think sometimes people ignore that mail that comes in. I think sometimes people don't make that outreach because it might be scary or something they're not used to, but it really can have a huge impact on whether it's your income, whether it's your housing, whether it's your family safety, and those things all have a big impact on those social determinants of health.
I think my biggest takeaway for this today, gosh, that's a difficult question to be able to completely summarize.
You actually had 4 points when we talked about this. We were 4 great ones.
I don't remember all of them.
I'll try to help you.
The first one is to make sure that everyone understands that it's not just about us being broken as a people. That narrative needs to be removed. And that's one of the foundations that comes to our organization. Yes, we're not broken. This is not a biological or genetic entity. We have significant issues within our community that have been created by the policies that have been developed over time that have created these gaps. And so in that, when you're taking a look at how it is that you're going to address the health of our families overall, you have to remember that there are policies and procedures that are in place that create these barriers that make it difficult for us to access. And so in that, the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you are taking a look at our experience, listening to what it is that we want for ourselves, understanding that we know inherently what it is that we need and what we want, but we may not be able to articulate it, but that does not mean that we should be dismissed by that. We need to be sure that we are taking a look at the organizations that are on the ground doing that direct work. The work that my staff has to do on a daily basis, the work that I still do to a certain extent, requires a 24/7 engagement and being able to drop everything to meet the needs of our families. And so that can't be discounted. It also is very important to make sure that you understand and know that while you may see certain people in the forefront, the ones that really create that work and the ones that are really making that difference are the ones that you will never see. Those are the ones that are the roots. Those are the ones that extend, and those roots extend out into our entire community, and they are interconnected. And that is how it is that we're able to create the stabilization with some of our families in the way that we want to. And always make sure that when you are talking about funding, and we're talking about fair and equitable funding, make sure that you're looking at each one of these organizations and see where their accountability structures are. Because we can say that a program works or we know about this program, but do we really know the intricacies of that program? Know where your investments are know where you're going to make your investments, and know how it is that you're going to connect agencies to one another so that they can hold one another accountable and also support them in those structures that they are developing so that we can have a true holistic model that will continue to address specifically Black maternal and infant mortality in our city. Franklin County has an opportunity to be able to be considered innovative because we've got the resources, we've got the supports, and we've got the knowledge to be able to pull all of these resources together to create the environments that we want to see.
You said one more. Can I share the one that you said? And okay, there was one more that I think was spectacular. It was about being able to identify whatever your points of privilege are and then figuring out how you deploy those against this. So, whatever it is, it could be that you have, like both shoes on at the same time. Whatever your privilege is, use it on behalf of women, on behalf of babies, on behalf of families, and on behalf of Black families.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We all have points of privilege in this room. If we didn't, we wouldn't be sitting in this room. And make sure that you identify those because it's not about comparing them to who others' points of privilege are. It's about what your point of privilege may be, what your source of power is, what your connectivity is, what it is that you have to offer. Utilize those things, leverage those things. Make sure that you are putting that message forward so that you can bring those to the table that really need to hear what it is that's happening, what's working, and what will continue to work into the future.
I am so excited about this panel. Thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with us and your contributions to this, to Central Ohio, and activating us in the directions that we need to go after we leave this room. With that, I'm going to ask Agata to come back up and get us ready for our next segment.